So when you're using autofocus, the basic way to do it is to use the arrow keys, and it comes up with a little 81 point grid, and then you can choose where you want to focus with the left and right arrows, and then press halfway. That focuses it, and then you take a photo. There's two other ways. There's one called the small target and the group target. Now to get into that, you first have to get into a focusing screen like that, and then you press the info key, and then you see on the left hand side there, down the bottom, if you go up and down, you can cycle through the ones that you want. So that's the one that I like. Then you've got everything, let the camera decide where to focus. Then you got this one, which is it's called a group target, and it'll try and focus just in that square group. So you can move that around and it'll focus just in those 6 boxes there. So that's good for like sports and things like that, or like birds, flying birds and things like that. And then the last one, press the info key again, and then you scroll one more, and this one's precision. If you're wanting to like really get in on something like a macro or something, this one's good. There's another way also, it's called face priority autofocus and pupil detection autofocus. So if you want to get into that, you can go back into the super control panel. You'll see the little face there, and then here you can change. So you've got just the face with any eye. It'll latch onto an eye and try and focus on the closest eye. Face with the right eye, face with the left eye, and then off. The other way to get it without going to the super control is if you get into the focusing again, press the info key again, and then this time you press the front dial left and right, and then you can choose it there. Okay, so I've put it on face only, so it puts white squares around the face and it'll follow them. See, the way to do it then is it goes, I'm going to pick the closest face, and you press halfway, and then you see it changes the one that's going to focus onto the little green box. So I'll do it again. There you go, did my dad, and then you can take the photo. Okay, so let's move it into the eye one and see what that does. Click on there, and then we'll move to the one with the eye. So that'll pick the closest eye. So I'll show you, if you put it on the eye one, it'll pick the closest eye to you. See how it puts a little green square around the eye? That's focused now on that right eye there. Let's do it to the left eye and see what that does. See if that works. Left eye, and then halfway shutter. Didn't work, so let's go a bit closer. There you go, it did the left eye. Also, it'll work when you put it in manual focus. So let's put it in manual focus. So if I'm out of focus, it kind of goes, where the hell's the face? But then if you try and manually focus, it starts to come in. See there, so that's pretty good. There's another thing called zoom autofocus or super spot autofocus. So what that does is you can zoom in and focus more precisely on things. So there's 2 ways of doing it. You can either touch the screen like that, and then on the side here, you see like this lever. You can make it bigger and smaller. Say I want to zoom in on that ruler. So, and then down below, there's a little icon, and then bang, that zooms in. And then you can also move it around, and then I think it uses the center. So if I want to zoom exactly in on that too, move it to the center, press the shutter halfway. The better way, rather than touching the screen, because the screen's very fiddly, is to assign one of the buttons. So now there's 2 ways to get to that. So in the camera, you've got the function 2 button there, and that's actually the multi-function. So what you do to do that, you hold that down, and then you move this, the front dial, that changes the multi-function. So I'll hold down that function 2, and I'll move that front dial, and then it brings up that multi-button thing. And then there you can change color, ISO, and then that one is magnify. So if I let go the function 2 button now, that's going to act exactly like this icon here, the magnify. Let's move into there again, one of the numbers. Press OK. Now if I hit the F function 2 button, it'll bring it up, and then if I function it again, it'll zoom in, and then I can focus more precisely. So hit the function again, and that brings you back out again. That's one way of getting to that magnify much faster using the multifunction FN2 button. Also, when you're zoomed in, you can actually use the back dial to zoom in. You see times 7, times 10, times 14. If you don't want to use that function 2 button, you can use any other button that you want. So the way to set up that is you go into the menu, custom, and then button dials, and then in here you can go button function, and then you can pick what you want. So function 1, function 2, function 3. So for instance, you never use that record button, you can go right, and then in here you pick magnify, click the record button, and then that same thing brings up the square. You can move it around if you want, and then hit it again and it brings it in. There are 5 different focusing methods. Now the way to get into each one of them, go into the custom menu, and then in the custom menu, the very first one is autofocus manual focus, and then in here autofocus mode. So you've got for still pictures, and also you can change it for movies as well. So for still pictures, you've got single autofocus, continuous autofocus, manual focus, single autofocus plus manual focus, and continuous autofocus plus tracking. If you want to select them quick, just get into the super control panel, move over to this one here, and then you can change the front dial to what you want. So let's go and look at single autofocus. So that's the main one. So wherever you move the cursor, this is good for still pictures. The second way is if you go into continuous autofocus. Now that one's good for movies, but I'll show you what it does when you're also in still. If I press the button, shutter button halfway and lock in on the lens, if I leave the shut button halfway and I move somewhere else, it'll start locking in there. So move it around. So it'll focus wherever you move the center bit, because that's where that focus square was. So that's continuously trying to, but you've got to have the shut button pressed halfway. There's also manual focus. So if you click there, now if you press halfway, nothing will happen. So you'll have to move your ring there, and that'll focus here, on the front of the lens. So if you move that left and right, that'll focus. The other one, single autofocus and manual focus. So you can focus singularly with the shutter button, and then also you can focus with the ring, the manual focus at the same time together. And the other one is continuous autofocus plus tracking. Okay, so say I lock onto that ball, it'll follow it around. Now it's not the greatest because the mirrorless camera is a contrast. When the contrast gets lost, it doesn't know what it's doing, so it loses the tracking ability. So there are other things in the menu. So if you get into the autofocus, manual focus menu, so that's the mode one where we looked at, where you can change it. Full-time autofocus. So what that is, if you have that on, that's very similar to the continuous autofocus, but you don't have to press the shutter button down. If I show you there, that's automatically, I haven't done anything, it focused on the camera. If I move it up, it focused on the photo, so I'm not touching the shutter button. So that's always focusing everywhere you go. This one here you can use to set up the back button focus. So what I'll do, I'll show you that one later on how to set up back button focus. This one here is reset the lens. So that's just for when you've got like auto zoom lenses, like the pancake lens that comes with the kit. Bulb time focusing. I've tried this. It didn't work. I don't know how to set that up. If anyone knows how to set that up. The focusing ring. Basically what that is when if you turn left, the focus ring on the manual focus of the lens, or you can turn right, whichever way you want. It's just a preference that you can set up. Manual focus assist. So what this does, when you're in manual focus, you can actually automatically turn on the magnifying and also the peaking. So I'll talk about peaking later, but I'll show you what it means. If I click that both on, okay, and then I put it in manual focus. Now when I turn the focus ring on the lens to start manually focusing, it's going to zoom in automatically, and it's also going to turn on peaking. So if I go like that, and then if I focus there, it's zoomed in automatically as soon as I turn the focus, and it also gives you the peaking, which I'll describe later what that is. This set home one, it's a bit confusing. Manual doesn't really explain it much, but I think I figured it out. So what you're doing, this works alongside the function buttons that you set up. If I set up that square there as the home one, so if you go there, it'll tell you the little HP at the top. So that's been set as the home one, all right? So we'll go into that. So if we get out of it, now you're thinking, what the hell does that mean? So it doesn't really mean anything when you're in here. So what it is, if you've got to go into the button dial and you've got to assign one of the buttons. So for instance, let's assign button function 3. And in here, let's go to there. You see there? So what it's saying is, I want to assign button function 3 as the home position one. So if I click that, now button function 3 is that. Now if I get out, say I want to focus there, all right. Now that's or let's just somewhere easier. So if I wanted there, all right, and see how that's now the focus point, all right. Now if I wanted to go to my home position, I press the function button 3 that I already signed up, and it'll go to it. So if I wanted to set the other one up in here, and I want to move it to, I don't know, down there somewhere, make that the home position for the small target, all right. So now when I move into small target mode, all right, so I want to focus over there, and if I want to quickly go to where I set the home one, press the function 3 button that I set up already, and it takes it to the home position. So that's what that is. So I don't know why you would need that, but it took me half a day to figure out what the hell that was. Okay, so this one is the autofocus illumination. That's that red light on the front of the camera. So if you're in low light, that will light up and throw some like red light on the subject. See how that red there? So it just lights it up a bit, and then you can get focus. A lot of people don't like it because it's very annoying, but it helps, whatever helps. This one here is where you do the face, so it's just another way of getting to it. This one here is the autofocus area pointer. So all that does is it won't light up the green light. So if I click there, that's where the autofocus is. If I press the shutter halfway, it's not going to show up that green box. That's all that does. And then the autofocus targeting pad. This one's quite handy. It will turn on or turn off the autofocus targeting pad when you're looking through the EVF. So what happens, it's really annoying, is when you put your eye up to the EVF, you can move the focus point on the back of the LCD screen with your finger. But the annoying part there is when you're looking through the viewfinder, your nose bloody touches the screen and it moves the focus around. So I like to turn that off so my nose doesn't move the focus target around when I'm looking through the EVF. So what drove me crazy is that it kept coming back on even though I turned it off. And what's happening is my nose was double tapping the screen, and that actually turns it back on without you wanting it to go on. So just got to be careful of that. If you see that you've turned off the autofocus targeting and your nose is still moving the bloody autofocus around, then it's because you double tapped it with your nose. So just double tap it like that. It turns it off, and then when you look up, into your EVF there, it won't. Your nose won't disrupt and move the stupid focus around. So moving back to this AEL auto exposure lock and auto focus lock, this is one way of changing what the actual shutter button does. And also here you can set up the back button focus. So let's just pick single autofocus for now. You can pick the different modes. So for instance, mode 2 is the default one. When you press the shutter button halfway, it'll autofocus. When you fully press it, it'll take the shot. And then the AEL button will be auto exposure lock. So if you wanted to set up back button focus, instead of pressing the shutter button halfway to focus, you want to just press the shutter button to take the shot and set the exposure. What you can do is you go to mode 3, and then in mode 3, that's saying the halfway shutter button will only lock the exposure. When you fully press it, it'll take the shot as per normal. And then the AEL, that'll actually do the single autofocus. But you've got to set up the AEL first. By default, the function 1 button there, that's set to be the AEL button. But if you don't want to use that one, where to do that is you go into the button dial there, button function, and say, function 1 is the AEL by default. You want to do function 3, you can set it here if you want. So it just depends where you want to, what button you want to use to do all your focusing for you. In this button function area, say for instance function button 2, alright, let's set that up to be peaking. There, alright, so press that. Alright, get into it. Now if I press function button 2 now, it's going to set up peaking. So what peaking is then is, you see those highlights in white there around the ruler? That's saying that that area is in focus. Better mainly for when you're in manual focus. So let's go into manual focus. Alright, I'm in manual focus now. And say I press the function 2. Alright. And then I'm manually focusing. When you focus, you see that white area there? It's like highlighting. When that's like the contrast, it's checking the contrast. I turn it off by pressing that function button, turn it back on, and then if I focus, like that's out of focus. Now if I move into focus, it's going to highlight the edges and tell you, right, that's in focus now. See, if I go a little bit too much and I come back. So that's just one way of helping you. It's called focus peaking, of focusing. It's good for when you're in manual focus. In the display, the D menu, peaking settings, you can change the color. So remember I just showed you focus peaking and it showed you like all the white dots. You can change the color there, and you can also change the intensity. If you want to take like action shots and you want to use that sequential shutter button feature, so sequential high or sequential low, with sequential high, if you've got it in continuous autofocus, it'll only focus on that first shot, and then the rest of the shots it won't continuously try to autofocus. So you have to set it to the sequential low. And then what sequential low, because it's slower, there's more space between the shots. What it'll do then, it'll take it'll focus on every shot that it takes. Another trick, if you want to move that focus point to the center, a quick way is see the OK button. If you hold it down, it jumps straight back to the center. Another tip you can use, you can create one of these just out of paper or anything, just like something that's got contrast, something that's dark and light, and then just carry that in your pocket, and then you can pin that up against something and focus on that and then take it away. Because mirrorless cameras, they use contrast rather than phase detect. So that's something to do with like the dark and the shadows and the mid-tones or something like that, rather than all the other cameras they use like this phase detecting. So that's it. Focusing is very important. I'm finding it's one thing that I need to master, especially with the continuous autofocus when you're taking sequential, like when I was taking of the dog. A lot of those shots didn't turn out, whether I was too fast, I didn't have enough light, or but yeah, if you can nail focusing, I mean that's like 50% of the job. So anyway, I'll see you next one.